starts the reading of chapter 11 in Farewell to Manzanar. Yes, yes, no, no. The homework was to read up to page 78. Chapter 11. Yes, yes, no, no. 27. Are you willing to serve in the armed forces of the United States on combat duty wherever ordered? Yes, no. 28. Will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and faithfully defend the United States from any or all attack by foreign or domestic forces, and forswear any form of allegiance or obedience to the Japanese Emperor or any other foreign government, power, or organization? Yes, no. From the War Relocation Authority application for leave clearance, 1943. Later in December, the administration gave each family a Christmas tree hauled in from the Sierras. A new director had been appointed, and this was his gesture of apology for all the difficulties that had led up to the riot. A promise of better treatment and better times to come. It was an honest gesture, but it wasn't much of a Christmas that year. Their presents were makeshift, the wind was roaring, Papa was drunk. Better times were a long way off, and the difficulties, it seemed, had just begun. Early in February, the government's loyalty oath appeared. Everyone 17 and over was required to fill it out. This soon became the most divisive issue of all. It cut deeper than the riot because no one could avoid it, not even Papa. After 5 months of self imposed isolation, this debate was what finally forced him out of the barracks and into circulation again. At the time, I was too young to understand the problem. I only knew there was no peace in our cubicle for weeks. Block organizers would come to talk to Papa and my brothers. They would huddle over the table a while, muttering like conspirators, sipping tea or one of his concoctions. Their voices gradually would rise to shouts and threats. Mama would try to calm the men down. Papa would tell her to shut up. Then Granny would interrupt and order him to quit disgracing Mama all the time. Once, he just shoved Granny across the room, up against the far wall, and back into her chair, where she sat sniffling while the arguments went on. If the organizers weren't there, Papa would argue with Woody. Or rather, Woody would listen to Papa lecture him on true loyalty, pacing from bunk to bunk, waving his cane. Listen to me, Woodrow. When a soldier goes into war, he must go believing he is never coming back. This is why the Japanese are such courageous warriors. They are prepared to die. They expect nothing else. But to do that, you must believe in what you're fighting for. If you do not believe, you will not be willing to die. If you are not willing to die, you won't fight well. And if you don't fight well, you will probably be killed stupidly, for the wrong reason, and unheroically. So tell me, how can you think of going off to fight? Woody always answered softly, respectfully, with a boyish and submissive smile. I will fight well, Papa. In this war, how is it possible? I am an American citizen. America is at war. But look where they have put us. The more of us who go into the army, the sooner the war will be over. The sooner you and Mama will be out of here. Do you think I would risk losing a son for that? You want me to answer no, no, Papa? Do you think that is what I'm telling you? Of course you cannot answer no, no. If you say no, no, you will be shipped back to Japan with all of those other bakatarai. But if I answer yes, yes, I will be drafted anyway, no matter how I feel about it. That is why they are giving us the oath to sign. No, that is not true. They are looking for volunteers, and only a fool would volunteer. Papa stared hard at Woody, making this a challenge. Woody shrugged, still smiling his boyish smile, and did not argue. He knew that when the time came, he would join the army, and he knew it was pointless to begin the argument again. It was a circle. His duty as a son was to sit and listen to Papa trash his way around it, and around it, and around it. A circle, or you might have called it a corral, like Manzanar itself, with no exit save via three narrow gates. The first led into infantry, the second back across the Pacific. The third, called relocation, was just opening up. Intern citizens who could find a job and a sponsor somewhere inland, away from the West Coast, were beginning to trickle out of camp. But the program was bogged down in paperwork. It was taking months to process applications and security clearances. A loyalty statement required of everyone. It was hoped might save some time and a lot of red tape. This, together with the search for loyal soldiers, had given rise to the ill fated oath. 2 weeks before the December riot, Jackal leaders met in Salt Lake City and passed a resolution pledging Nisi to volunteer out of the camps for military service. A footnote. At this time, this move was widely condemned and Innu charges escalated. This was, in fact, one of the causes for Tayama's beating. Since then, history has proved the Jackal right. Mike Masaoka, who pushed resolution through, understood that the most effective way Japanese Americans could combat the attitudes that put them in places like Manzanar was to shed their blood on the battlefield. The All-Nisi 442nd Regimental Combat Team was the most decorated American unit in World War II. It also suffered the highest percentages of casualties and deaths. They were much admired, and the Jackal's strategy succeeded. This was visible proof that these 110,000 people could be trusted. End footnote. In January, the government announced its plan to form an all-Nisi combat regiment. An all-Nisi combat regiment. While recruiting for this unit and speeding up the relocation program, the government figured it could simultaneously weed out the disloyal and thus get a clearer idea of exactly how many agents and Japanese sympathizers it actually had to deal with. This part of it would have been comical if the results were not so grotesque. No self respecting espionage agent would willingly admit he was disloyal. Yet, the very idea of the oath itself appearing at the end of that first chaotic year became the final gold that prodded many once loyal citizens to turn malignantly anti American. From the beginning, Papa knew his own answer would be yes, yes. He agreed with Woody on this much. Even though it meant swearing allegiance to the government that had sent him to Fort Lincoln and denying his connections with the one country in the world where he might still have the rights of a citizen, the alternative was worse. If he said no, he could be sent to Tule Lake Camp in Northern California where all the disloyal were to be assembled for what most people believed would be eventual repatriation to Japan. Papa had no reason to return to Japan. He was too old to start over. He believed America would win the war, and he knew, even after all he endured, that if he had a future, it still lay in this country. What's more, a move to Tule Lake could mean a further splitting up of our family. This was a hard choice to make, and even harder to hold to. Anti American feeling in camp ran stronger than ever. Pro Japan forces were trying to organize a no vote by blocks in massive resistance. Others wanted to boycott the oath altogether in a show of non cooperation or through the mistaken fear that anyone who accepted the form would be shipped out of camp. The no-nos back to Japan, the yes-yeses into an American society full of wartime hostility and racial hate. A meeting to debate the matter was called in our mess hall. Papa knew that merely showing his face would draw stares and muttered comments. Yes, yes was just what they expected of an Innu, but he had to speak his mind before the no contingent carried the block. Saying no as an individual was one thing, bullying the entire camp into it was quite another. At the very least, he didn't want to be sucked into such a decision without having his own opinion heard. Woody wanted to go with him, but Papa said it was a meeting for heads of households only, and he insisted on going alone. From the time he heard about it, he purposely drank nothing stronger than tea. He shaved and trimmed his mustache and put on a silk tie. His limp was nearly gone now, but he carried his cane and went swaggering off down into the narrow walkway between the barracks, punching at the packed earth in front of him.